Afternoon, everyone. Lot to unpack here this weekend. We had a few sports, a few teams play. The Knicks started their preseason. Going to touch on that a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot bigger things to cover, though. We have the division series starting. We have both New York baseball teams in that, the Mets and the Yankees. Very nice to see for the city. We had a tale of two different stories when you talk about the Jets and the Giants. I think I'm gonna touch on the Giants first, just because I think that's the best way to start it. I mean, it's fresh in my head. The games both happened yesterday. So when you talk about the Jets, the the Jets haven't been playing anywhere close to what people thought they were gonna be this year. I mean, to think that a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers could come in and immediately correct all of the poor play we've seen from the Jets probably in the past decade. I mean, they haven't won a playoff game in forever. It's unfortunate to see because these fans have endured so much these past, honestly, few decades. I mean, they go through quarterbacks like it's going out of stock. Like they just seem to never find the correct quarterback, and they thought they finally had one in Aaron Rodgers. But for the franchise to almost lead their fans on, to make them think this year was going to be different, to make them think that, yes, now we finally have all the weapons, that this is going to be the year, it was it was foolish. They didn't even think that maybe we should get a coach to cater to Aaron Rodgers because we're building this whole team around him. Instead, now they have a huge issue because Aaron Rodgers is butting heads with Robert Saleh. Aaron Rodgers does not like the style of play. He does not seem to mesh well with the playbook that Saleh has. They run the same simple plays. You have to blame Aaron Rodgers as well, because bottom line is Aaron Rodgers is running the offense. He is the quarterback. He's the guy on the field. And when you throw 3 interceptions, you can't blame that on the coach. You have to blame it on yourself. You have to blame it on the players that are on the field, not the guy that's on the sidelines. He has all of these people. He has all of these different players that he should be taking advantage of, and instead, he seems to be going to who he's comfortable with, which is Allen Lazard. I don't think he's comfortable with Garrett Wilson. I don't think he's comfortable with Breece Hall. I really think that he's having a little bit of trouble acclimating, which is worrisome because he had all of last year to get used to the playbook, to maybe tweak a few things, to come up with plays himself. But instead, we're seeing the growing pains this year. This is the last year of Aaron Rodgers' contract. They knew they were only gonna have him for 2 years. Maybe they'll have him beyond this year. Maybe they'll work out a team-friendly contract, but right now, there's no guarantee that Aaron Rodgers is going to be here next year. He didn't even have a 70% completion percentage. He was 29 for 54. I mean, considering that he threw the ball 54 times and it wasn't working, you would think that they would turn to the run game a little bit more, turn to Breece Hall, who is an all-world running back. They didn't. They didn't adjust. They played very poorly in the first half. They played a little better in the second half, but it just was a pathetic performance altogether. It's a totally different story when you talk about the Giants. The Giants have the same record as the Jets, and let's be honest here, the Giants were expected to lose this year. They weren't expected to win. And for a team that's not expected to win, to play up to par with their crosstown rivals there, it's good to see as a Giants fan. It's good to see the Giants have the same record as the Jets. It's something that we could kinda hold over their heads a little bit, like, be like, "Hey, we're 2 and 3, you're 2 and 3." I was getting a lot of, problems from Jets fans week 1 after the Giants lost to the Vikings. They're just like, "Oh, how can you lose to the Vikings? Not only lose to the Vikings, but get embarrassed by them." Last week, guess what? Jets did the same thing. Yes. Did we think that the Vikings were gonna be this good? No. So it was a little bit different week 1 now than it is now because, yeah, the Vikings weren't supposed to be good, but they are. They're 5-0. But that's no excuse for a team like the Jets should go out there and be able to compete with anyone, not just the bad teams, but the great teams like the Vikings now. They should be able to beat their division rivals. It's gonna be huge to see the Jets can turn this around, and if they can't, obviously Robert Saleh is on the hot seat. I don't know if they would even think about making a mid-season change there at coach. Thought about these things in the offseason. They shouldn't have just thought everything's gonna be okay now that Aaron Rodgers is back. We don't need to touch anyone else. But talking a little bit more about the Giants here, move on from the Jets because it seems like all I could do is talk poorly about them. They found a way to be a great team in the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks are 3-1. The Giants had no business winning this game. They didn't have Malik Neighbors. They didn't have Devin Singletary, and the secondary weapons showed up. Darius Slayton had a bunch of big catches. Wan'Dale Robinson had a touchdown. I mean, Slayton had a touchdown too, but on the ground, Eric Gray looked phenomenal. Phenomenal. He had over, I wanna say he had close to 70 yards. Daniel Jones, yet again, had another big game. I mean, he was 23 for 34. He had 257 yards. I mean, that's a 109 rating right there. That's amazing from Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, outside of week 1, has 1 turnover, and it was a Hail Mary pass that he threw late in the game, which has a high percentage of being picked off, you know? It's not like he made a bonehead play and it was like a short interception, like, no, it was a Hail Mary pass that most likely was going to be intercepted, and it was, but to see only 1 turnover from Daniel Jones since week 1 is great. I mean, Daniel Jones has proven that, yes, he's serviceable at quarterback, and he's not just serviceable, he's been good. He's been pretty good. I think we finally saw what this Giants defense could do. They finally played how people thought they would with Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau. Uh, it seemed like every play they were pressuring Geno. It seemed like every drive there was a sack. They just made the big plays. And to see from Isaiah Simmons late in the game when Giants fans were like, "Oh, here we go again. They're down. They're up only by 3. Seattle's going for the field goal there. It's 23-20. They're just like, okay, this game's going to go into overtime. Giants are going to lose in heartbreaking fashion again." They didn't. They won. They Isaiah Simmons blocked the field goal and they took it back for a touchdown. That's the plays you wanna see from a team that's not necessarily supposed to win now, but it's that those glimpses you wanna see. You wanna see the glimpses of, "Hey, we don't give up, and we're going to win. We're gonna find ways to win. Yes, we might not have the best players on the field. Yes, we might not be favored to win, but we're gonna figure out those ways to turn those should-be losses or would be." And probably last year, that game would have been a loss. They turned a should be or would be loss into a win. And that's great for me to see. Not just that they beat a great team, but because they showed grit, they showed heart, and they found ways to win. It's 2 completely different stories here in New York football when you look at it. The one team that should be losing is finding ways to win, and the one team that should be winning just seems to be finding new ways to lose, which is very, very interesting to see unfold this year. Obviously, it's very early in the season, not even halfway through. The big games down the stretch are obviously going to decide what these teams really have in them, but early on sets the tone. And right now, the tone is drastically different than what we thought coming into the year. So I'm gonna move on to the Yankees. I'm gonna touch on them again later in the show when we talk about just the division series in general. But I'm gonna touch on the Yankees now because it is a New York based show and I do want to highlight them. So, a big question coming into the series was who was going to be the starting left fielder, who was going to be the starting first baseman. Well, the Yankees put out Alex Verdugo in left field and they put out Oswaldo Cabrera at first base. I'm going to be honest, when I saw the lineup, I thought Oswaldo Cabrera at first base. I talked about last week how I thought Ben Rice was the clear option there because at least he was a natural first baseman. Yes, he might not be able to hit these tough pitchers they're going to face, but he would at least be able to field the position somewhat well. Instead, they went the route of the young Oswaldo Cabrera. And let me tell you, his defense impressed. It did. There were multiple times where he scooped balls. He stretched out on a play that I thought he had no business in getting. I thought the runner was going to be safe by a mile, but he looked almost natural there. He looked like he had been playing first base for years, that he was a veteran. He was accustomed. He looked almost like Anthony Rizzo out there, funny enough. He had a hit in that game, too. It led to a rally later on, too. So to see Oswaldo Cabrera finally getting the playing time he deserves, I thought earlier on in the season when Oswaldo Cabrera was doing so well, when we thought John Birdie was going to be getting a bulk of the playing time at third base, but then he went down pretty early. Um, and we saw Oswaldo Cabrera almost catch fire instantly against Houston. He had a huge home run like game one of the season. Like we're going back far. And then all of a sudden he just disappeared off the face of the earth. They acted like Oswaldo Cabrera didn't even exist. And they like refused to use him. Now to see that he's playing, he's ready to play. Boone's constantly talking about how Oswaldo Cabrera is saying, let's go, let's do it. This is the time. The time is now to win. And he's always ready to play. And it's great to see that his benching, like throughout almost the whole season, a majority of the season, I would say, didn't really affect him much. He looks really natural out there. And that's great to see. Now, touching on Alex Verdugo in left field, that was really the one where it was you were either choosing the great fielder or you were choosing the better hitter. I'm not going to say great hitter because we only saw a certain amount of at bats from Jason Dominguez this year and last year. So I don't honestly know how he truly is. And they went with the veteran Alex Verdugo. Jazz Chisholm talked about how Alex Verdugo has played on a bunch of big stages. He played in LA and he joked, not the Angels. He played for the Dodgers, which is probably the second biggest, if not like the 1A, 1B, the Yankees and the Dodgers being those two biggest markets. He's played there. He then went to Boston, which is another huge market. And then now he's with the Yankees. Listen, do I think that Alex Verdugo is a great player? No, but he played great on Saturday. There were two plays where I know for a fact Jason Dominguez would not have made those plays. He had to move laterally. He slid for a ball in foul territory, and it looked like he didn't get it. I think they called it that he didn't get it at first, and then the baseline umpire saw it and was like, "Yeah, no, he got it." That play saved a run. Alex Verdugo not only was great with the glove, but he was great with the bat. He went 2 for 3 with a walk, and he had the game-winning RBI. Alex Verdugo came through. Yes, do I think Jason Dominguez is gonna get some at bats here and there? I do, but Alex Verdugo is gonna be starting, and they have to stick with him, and if he's gonna be in the lineup, I hope he plays great because I saw flashes of him being great earlier in the season, and then he kinda fell off the face of the earth a around the All-Star break and was one of the league's worst hitters. I mean, he was hitting the ball on the ground at an unprecedented rate, um, but to see Alex Verdugo turn the page, I called it an Alex Verdugo legacy game. Like, maybe Alex Verdugo could be the guy. I talked last week about there's always those guys that you don't expect are gonna be the difference makers in the postseason, become the difference makers. Maybe Alex Verdugo could be that guy. Maybe he can be the playoff hero. Maybe he could be the Jeremy Pena of 2022 for the Yankees. I mean, the pressure seems to not be getting to him, and it shouldn't because he's played on some of the biggest stages out there. Listen, when you talk about this lineup and the players that came through Saturday, listen, Juan Soto was great. He went 3 for 5. I mean, Juan Soto's generational. He came through. Aaron Judge, on the other hand, did not, and that was very disappointing to me because I saw Shohei Ohtani hit the 3-run homer to tie the game against the Padres early, and they were down big. They were down 3 to nothing, and Shohei Ohtani hit the 3-run homer to tie the game. I was like, "Oh, now the narrative's gonna be Ohtani comes through big, and Judge was nowhere to be seen," which is true. Judge was nowhere to be seen Saturday. You would think he would be the player that would be the difference maker because he is the superstar. He is the captain. He's the MVP. He's probably going to win his second one, should be third MVP this year. And he yet again has a lackluster playoff performance Saturday. Tonight, to me, Aaron Judge has to come through. Whether it's with a home run, it's with a game saving grab in the outfield, because his defense is phenomenal. It is great. And a lot of people don't give him credit for that. He switched from right field to center field, and he is a very big guy. To play center field as a big guy like that, it's very hard. And I talked about that my first episode of the show, how Aaron Judge, yes, he plays the field, so he is more valuable than Ohtani. But to me, Ohtani's never played in the playoffs, and he came through big in his first game. Yes, he had a bad game too, but the whole Dodgers team had a bad game too, so I'm not going to hold that against him. Aaron Judge needs to prove that he's the best player in the league. And but to do that, he needs to win a championship. And not only does he need to win a championship, he needs to be a big part of this championship. He needs to be the anchor. I had someone compare Aaron Judge's playoff performances to Alex Rodriguez prior to 2009. And I would agree with that in some way because to me, Aaron Judge has played well in some postseasons, and not enough people give him credit for that. And not enough people give Alex Rodriguez credit for some of his playoff play. I think the thing that killed Alex Rodriguez back in when he first started with the Yankees was being reverse swept by the Red Sox back in 2004. And I think that was the thing that people point to because Alex Rodriguez did have a bad 4 games to end that series. Judge has had a similar series. I mean, they got swept by the Astros in 2022, and it seemed like Aaron Judge couldn't get anything done. After hitting 62 home runs in the regular season that year, he was nowhere to be found. And we can't have that this year if we want to win. We need Aaron Judge to be a huge part. We need him to be the guy. You talk about having the guy, he has to be it. Aaron Judge has to be that guy. But it's going to be interesting to see tonight. We have 2 lefties on the mound, Carlos Rodon, and I'm not quite sure. I can't remember who it is for the Royals. They have a bunch of um, guys that get it done in that rotation, but none of the names are pretty flashy, so I don't really know his name. I know he's pretty good. He had a 3 ERA this year. I'll tell you that much. Um, he pitched 6 scoreless innings too in the wild card series. I know. I just can't remember his name. I'm blanking on it. But The Yankees, yes, they hit worse versus left-handed pitchers, but they hit better than the Royals versus left-handed pitchers. They have a 107 WRC plus. If you don't know what WRC plus, it means weighted runs created plus. It is a stat that kind of measures the level of hitting that a player has. It's a newer stat, and not a lot of people know about it, but a lot of baseball fans do. So I'm gonna touch on that. WRC plus 100 is league average. So it's pretty simple there. 100 is league average. Anything above that is above league average. Pretty sure Aaron Judge this year had close to a 200 WRC plus. So he was close to 100% above league average. But getting back to the fact of the two lefties on the mound here, Carlos Rodon, whoever the Royals have going, yet again, don't know his name. Sorry. Um, The Yankees hit lefties better than the Royals do. They have close to a 240 average, I know, against lefties this year as well. The Royals, on the other hand, hit below league average versus left-handed pitching. They have an 87 WRC plus against lefties. They have a low 200s average. I think it's like 207, something close to that. And so it's yet another advantage for the Yankees, and they have no excuses tonight. It's going to be interesting to see Carlos Rodon. He a lot of times gets a little too amped up, but I think this can be the perfect setting for him. I'm very excited to see playoff Carlos Rodon tonight. I'm going to talk about the no excuses for the Yankees to end the show. But moving on, the Mets, the make it happen Mets. I have to give credit where credit is due. The Mets played incredible in the wild card series. Yes, they were the only team that didn't sweep their opponent, but that's not to be held against them because the Mets probably did have the hardest opponent on paper. The Brewers won over 90 games. I think they were one of the only teams in the wild card round to have over 90 wins. I think might have been the only team to have over 90 wins. They won their division. They were pretty dominant all year, and they dominated the Mets just a week before. And for the Mets to make that adjustment, to never say die, to keep coming back, it seemed like game one, the Mets were down in a hole. They weren't going to win. It really looked like the odds were stacking up against them. And yet again, the Mets found a way to win. I'll give them credit for that. They did. Yes, game two was a little disappointing, but game three, they wrapped it up. And now they're in the DS against their division rival, the Phillies. When you talk about the Mets, to me, I think it comes down to the management. Carlos Mendoza is a newer manager. I know he's great. He's been making adjustments. One adjustment I give him credit for was taking Edwin Diaz out of the closer role so early in the year, which the Yankees did not do with Clay Holmes. But going back to Edwin Diaz, Carlos Mendoza does see him as the Mets' best reliever on the team. And I think the whole Mets fan base knows that's not the case. Mendoza's been making questionable decisions. I think Kodai Senga starting in game one was one of them. It could have went really against them, but it didn't. They found a way to not only win that game, but to win it by a lot. It's going to be a battle of the bullpens, too. Both of those bullpens are very, very not great, I'll say. They're not great. The Phillies being the better of the two bullpens, I believe. They have Strom. They acquired a bunch of people at the deadline to bolster that bullpen. I think they did a lot better of a job addressing their bullpen at the deadline than the Mets did. And I think we saw that last night when the Mets, yes, they came back against Matt Strom, but the Phillies have a deeper lineup. They have Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto. You know, it seems like that lineup will never end. It's a never-ending lineup to me. And the difference to me is they have a set star. Bryce Harper is a star. He's a proven postseason player, too. He played well for the Phillies when they had their run in 2022. Yes, they came up short last year against the Diamondbacks, but the Diamondbacks made the World Series last year. So I'll give them credit for playing well against the Diamondbacks, you know? They have the experience. The Mets don't have the experience. It just seems like the Phillies, the board's resetting. It's good. It's good. Okay. So the it seems like the Phillies, like everywhere you talk about, have the better the better team. They match up with the Mets very well. And yes, it was a disappointing game one. You have to win that game with Zach Wheeler. I cannot get over the importance of the fact you have to win the game with your ace on the mound. You cannot let your team lose when you have your ace on the mound. And he pitched as well as Zach Wheeler did. Zach Wheeler looked disgusting in game one. And the Mets were complaining about the zone, but that zone was going both ways. There were a lot of questionable calls from the umpire on both sides. So when you talk about the umpire being a factor there, it you kind of can null it just by the fact that it was going both ways. It wasn't just going one way or the other. Zach Wheeler was just that good. His slider looked like a wiffle ball. I was looking at the highlights. He made the batters look silly. And the fact that the Phillies couldn't pull out a win there was the most disappointing thing for me when I saw the Phillies. I was really worried for the Phillies after game one because they had their ace on the mound. He pitched well, and they still couldn't win. And that's what the Mets need to do. They need to take advantage of the opportunities that are given to them. They had the opportunity to win last night for a while, and they couldn't take advantage of it. Which was it was super disappointing as to see, the Mets lose like that because, yeah, they they had the lead, and they came back in the ninth, and they still lost the game. It's gonna be a great series to see because both of these teams have that no quit energy that you need in the playoffs. I think it's gonna be a close one. I think it's gonna go to 5 games. I think it might be the only division series that goes to 5 games. Very interesting to see there. Alright. I'm gonna talk about just some of the other series that went on in the wild card. We touched on the Mets. So let's touch on my least favorite team in the league, the Houston Astros. The Houston Astros looked like they might finally be in the decline again. I mean, in the regular season, they didn't play well, to say the least. I mean, I'd say the only reason they're in the playoffs is because they were in the worst division in baseball, and they wouldn't have been on top of any other division besides the AL West, and they barely make it into the postseason because of that, and it seems like the Cinderella story, Detroit Tigers, were just too much for them to handle. The Tigers only scored like a run or 2 in each game. They gave the Astros the opportunity to win. I think those games were very winnable for the Astros, and to see them lose those games should be worrisome for the Houston Astros because when you talk about the playoffs, leads change constantly. Okay, I saw it in the Yankee game Saturday night. The Yankees were it seemed like trading blows with the Kansas City Royals. I saw it with the New York Mets. I mean, it just seems like the gr the great teams just find ways to match each other. And the Houston Astros couldn't even do that. So they did not deserve to beat the Tigers. They did not play well enough to beat the Tigers. And I think this is the start of a decline for the Houston Astros. The Tigers, on the other hand, they played pretty well. They came into the postseason hot. And when you talk about when the calendar shifts to October and it seems like everything gets more intense, the teams that come into October playing well, playing the best, not necessarily being the best team during the regular season, but just during that time frame, they seem to succeed the most. And the Detroit Tigers kind of proved that theory there. I mean, I saw it with the Diamondbacks last year, the Phillies in 2022. They came out and they played tough against the Houston Astros, but I just don't think they're good enough. I'm going to touch on it when I talk about some of the ALDS games that have happened. I don't think they're good enough. I think their path ends now with the Cleveland Guardians. And but in the future, they have a great farm system too. They haven't even gotten the best out of some of their players like Spencer Torkelson, who everyone thought would immediately be an elite level first baseman. But we've seen him kind of take a back seat and not even be a relevant part to this Tigers team. And we talk about one of the star players they got to try and bolster that young roster a few years back in Javier Baez be a non-factor. He's not on the roster, I don't think. I mean, he hasn't played if he is. Um, if they could just make the right decisions with their money, if they can make the right decisions with playing their younger guys, if they can see what they have, maybe flip a few of those prospects for major league ready talent, they're going to be a real threat in the future. They kind of remind me of the Orioles a little bit. Touching on the Orioles have not won a playoff game in a decade. In the past 2 years, they're 0-5. The Orioles fans thought the division was theirs this year without question. They thought the Yankees weren't even gonna be a threat to them at the top. They thought they had it in the bag, and when they faced the Kansas City Royals, we saw what this Orioles team truly is. They're young and inexperienced. You can have all of the talent in the world, and it seems like players keep popping up out of the blue for the Baltimore Orioles. Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, um, Colton Cowser this year is in the Rookie of the Year running. It just seems like they keep having these young guys. I mean, they haven't even seen what Jackson Holiday his true potential yet. I mean, the kid's 21 years old. I think actually 20 years old. So they still have a lot in their farm system, and I think they need it because they're an incomplete team. Their bullpen was very shaky all year. I saw the Yankees come back against them multiple times. Their starting pitching wasn't great outside of Corbin Burns, and I mean they weren't even able to win with Corbin Burns in game 1. Game 2, they had, Nick Pivetta. He was also a great pitcher. Like, on paper, these were games the Orioles should have won, but they didn't have the energy it takes to win in October. I touch on that a lot because to me, it comes down to the winning culture. You need to have a winning culture from the top down. You need to have a winning culture in order to win. You can't just coast by and think you're gonna win it. And that's what makes me mad about the Mets because I saw their fans give up halfway through the season thinking that the season was over and they were just going to take it like that. They had no issue with it. They had no issue with being a lackluster team. But all of a sudden they start competing and the fans are back on the bandwagon. Winning culture is the deciding factor in the playoffs. Yes, I said the Orioles didn't play great against the Royals. They didn't, but the Royals didn't play great either. Sorry. The the Royals didn't play great either. They pitched great. They have a pitching staff that yes, none of the names stick out to you, probably outside of Michael Walker. Um, but they find ways to piece that pitching staff together and make it great. It's kind of like the Tampa Bay Rays in that sense, where yeah, the names don't stick out. They're think about it, but they have pitched amazing. And I keep talking about pitching. That's kind of all I see as a very positive factor for the Royals. Too much here, but their lineup outside of Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez is average at best. And this is why everyone's saying the Yankees have no excuses because they are playing this Kansas City Royals team. But I am scared of them because they have a winning culture. They have deciding factor. I don't know if the Yankees have it yet. I think if they win tonight, I think game one kind of proved they do. I mean, it was kind of a complete team effort there. The the winning culture is what scares me with the Royals here. It's Bobby Wood Jr. scares me, like on the hitting side, but it's that energy. It's the winning energy that really, really scares me as a Yankee fan here because it seems like they find ways to win. And when you find ways to win, it's hard to lose. And for the Yankees to win game one, that's great. But you lose tonight, it becomes a new series against the Royals. Jumping ahead a little bit there, but the the Royals are a young team. They're going to get better. And I don't think it's going to be a necessarily easy series for the Yankees here against the Royals, but I do think it should be one. Um, the Royals, they're just average. All right. When you talk about the Braves played the Padres. To me, the Padres are the best team in the National League. Going to touch on that a little bit more when I talk about their games against the Dodgers. The Padres are just so good. I didn't think the Braves had a chance, but I thought the Braves would at least be a little bit more competitive than that. I get they've had injuries. Austin Riley went down. Ronald Acuna Jr. went down, but they still had a lot of good pieces there. I thought they were going to be able to compete, but they just weren't. It was really, really sad for me to see because the Braves are, in my opinion, the best run organization in baseball. They get young talent and then they extend them for a team friendly contract. Like it's kind of just like an owner's dream, like where you're able to have like all these star players like Sean Murphy at catcher. Like he's one of the best catchers in the league. You have Matt Olson who's filling the shoes of Freddie Freeman and he's doing so quite well. You have Ozzy Albies, a homegrown talent at second base. Shortstop is kind of he's the question mark there. Orlando Arcia. They gave up on Vaughn Grisham a little early, if you ask me. I mean, they didn't even really give him a chance at the big league level, and they just immediately shipped him to Boston. Um, Third base, you have another homegrown talent in Austin Riley. Left field, you have, I think it's Ozuna, or no, Ozuna DHs for them. Left field, I think they kind of just fill someone in there to play. Who is it? He played for them a few years ago too. Oh, Adam Duvall. And then center field was Acuna, and right field was, or no, center field is Michael Harris, another homegrown talent, and another guy that got injured this year for them. And Ronald Acuna Jr. in right field. When they're fully healthy, obviously that's the team I'm talking about. But a lot of those guys did go down. I mentioned Michael Harris, Austin Riley, and Ronald Acuna Jr. being the most notable out of any of them. They had it all on paper, and then the injuries came, and it seemed like they just couldn't rebound this year. It's very disappointing for me to see, especially with the hurricane that happened in Georgia recently. I thought they would be able to rally around that a little bit, like in 2017 when the Houston Astros rallied around the hurricane that hit them. I thought this might have been a team where we could see them rally the community together, make the World Series here, make everything seem a little bit better for the people there. Very disappointing for me to see. All right. So I'm going to touch on the division series here. Touched on Phillies Mets already. That series is obviously going to be great, but I touched on it already. There's not really much more I can say on it. So I'm going to touch on Tigers Guardians now. To me, it's just there's no competition here. Like the Cleveland Guardians are going to win this series. It's just a matter of in how many games. Will the Tigers be able to rally that don't say die, that Cinderella story energy they've had over the past month and a half that got them into the postseason? Are they going to be able to use that energy to make it past the Cleveland Guardians? I just don't see it. I mean, they didn't even put up a fight in game one. They lost 7-0, or yeah, it was 7-0. Um, Listen, the Cleveland Guardians to me also another average team, but their pitching is phenomenal, like way better than any team in the postseason. Maybe besides the Padres. I think the Padres also have a great pitching staff, which is weird to say because in the past few years, that's been the Padres' issue was their pitching staff. Now it just seems like it's the opposite. Like they traded away the generational Juan Soto for a great pitcher in Michael King, and now their offense is a little lackluster. That being said, they did score 10 runs last night, but that's not the Tigers nor the Guardians. So when you talk about this series, it's kind of just it's another series in the American League where there's not much to say on it. It's kind of decided before it even happens. The Guardians are going to win this series. They're going to make it to the championship series. Um, I mean, they won the division that the Tigers are in. I think that's enough to be said there when you talk about it. The Padres and Dodgers is one of the most interesting series we've seen in the past few years. I mean, obviously they're division rivals. They play each other every year, and it seems like they always give us good fights. This is amazing as a baseball fan to be able to watch this. Game one, I thought the Padres had it when they were up 3-0, but the Dodgers just came back, and they came back with a vengeance. They won 7-5. I mean, the Padres also came back for a little bit in that game as well. They had tied the game 5-5, but then the Dodgers pulled away. I think the Dodgers have the hitting advantage, but I think the Padres pitching is not only better, I think it's exponentially better because they have starters that can start in, 3 games, and then they have other starters they can use out of the bullpen. I mean, Michael King was phenomenal in the wild card series for the Padres. I think he's going next game, or he might have pitched already. I'm not quite sure. They have you Darvish. I mean, Joe Musgrove did go down, which sucks for them because Joe Musgrove is a huge part of their pitching staff. But they also have Dylan Cease. They kind of have 4 guys that are legit studs when you talk about it. They also have one of the best bullpens in baseball. I think the best bullpen in baseball. They have Robert Suarez. They have um they got another guy from the Marlins, Taylor Rogers they got. I mean, listen, this team is so complete, the Padres and the Dodgers. They were supposed to be the team to beat, but I think the Padres have this series. I think they do. I think the Padres are going to beat the Dodgers in this series. I think that the Padres have enough hitting to hit the Dodgers' lackluster pitching, and I don't think the Dodgers have enough hitters to overcome the pitching deficit they have. I really do. My phone just fell. That's okay. Um, Yankees Royals. Going to touch on that as the last subject of the show. Touch on it one last time. I know I've touched on it a lot, but it really is the main subject to me that it does interest me. So I am going to yet again have a sidebar on the Navy football team. All right. Listen, I know I'm a New York show. I advertise myself as a New York sports show, but Navy really interests me. I mean, seeing them now win another game. They beat Air Force for the first time on their home field since 2017. They're up to 5-0. I mean, it's kinda just a waiting game to see if they could keep winning up until that Notre Dame game, and then that Notre Dame game can be the biggest game of the season for them. It really can. They can put themselves on the map with a win against Notre Dame if they keep winning, and they do have a bye week coming up, so they really only have to win, like, 1 or 2 games before they play Notre Dame. I think it's only 1, actually, and if Navy can just keep playing well, that's the thing. You have to keep playing well up until you play Notre Dame because you need all of the wins you can get. Because it is so hard in college football to put yourself on the map because there are so many teams there, and the playoff format in the past years has been, very selective. It was only 4 teams in the college football playoffs. And when you talk about how many college football teams there are, not only in general, but in Division One and these high level teams, there's still so many of them. To So in order to kind of put yourself on the map, you need to win every game you can. You need to beat ranked teams. And that really stands out in Navy's schedule is that Notre Dame game. And if they can win that game, they could really catapult themselves into the college football playoff conversation. I mean, they have the weapons. I've never seen 2 running backs have over 100 yards until I watched the Navy game Saturday. I've never seen a quarterback rush for 100 yards as many times as Blake Horvat has in college football, at least. And in the NFL, it's a little bit more common, but in college football, seeing the quarterback run for 100 yards so many games in a row, uh, they have the pieces this year. Like, it seems like it's silly to say that last year was almost a completely different team, even though they had a lot of these pieces. It was because these players are now more mature. They know the plays and they're hungry to win. And I think we've seen that every game that Navy's played this season. It's amazing for me to see. All right. Now to close out the show, I want to talk about a statement I said earlier. That the Yankees have no excuses. The Yankees are hated in all of Major League Baseball. I want to say that the media coverage is mostly negative about them. We see so many people trying to bring them down just because they have this illustrious history. And the fact that they haven't won since 2009 seems like forever. But when you talk about the Mets, they haven't won since the 1970s. And they have lost the World Series to the Yankees in 2000. I don't get why the narrative is so drastically different there. They're both in the same market. Yes, one organization is older. Yes, more one organization is more well known. But the Yankee symbol brings in so many fans. It has the most fans. The Yankee insignia makes the most money out of any team in baseball, and the only one that is close is the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the fact that they're hating on the Yankees so much when they bring in such a vast majority of the revenue is is disappointing to see. But to me, if the Yankee fans want to finally be liked again, I think they have to win. I think they have to win the World Series here. Not even if they wanna be liked, but if they wanna be feared again, they have to win the World Series, and the Yankee organization was known for decades, for almost a century, for being feared, for being the team that no one could beat, and to me, the Yankees haven't had since the 1990s. Yes, they won in 2009. It's the only World Series that I've seen in my lifetime and was probably one of the fondest memories I have. It feels like so long because this Yankee organization has this illustrious history, and now they finally have the path in front of them. They don't have to face the Baltimore Orioles. They don't have to face the Houston Astros Honestly, it's just they have a clear path to the World Series here. The Yankee players should be feeling pressure. They should be feeling, "We have to win," and that's the only answer. We have to win. We have to put everything we have on the field. Aaron Judge has to step it up in the playoffs. Every player we have, I saw Garrett Cole not pitch well game 1, he has to step it up. Every player on that field has to be feeling it, that they have to be part of a winning culture in order to win. This is the year for the Yankees. It really is. I don't think I've ever seen a playoff bracket as clear of a path for the Yankees to make it to the World Series ever. But they can't just make it to the World Series, they have to win the World Series. So when I compare them to a team like the San Diego Padres in the National League, who I believe is the best team, I think they match up pretty well. They have good pitching, they have great hitting, they have what it takes to win this year. They went out and they got Juan Soto. There should be no excuses to not win. This is the Yankees. Alright, I think that's all I have for today. Gonna be interesting to see everything unfold here for the playoffs for the MLB and sports in general. Alright, see you next week.